Good evening. I'm Earl Butch Graves Jr., CEO of Black Enterprise, and I want to welcome you to tonight's Black Enterprise Economic Equity and Racial Justice Town Hall, The Future of Work. For Black Americans, more than any other group in the United States, the importance of this topic goes beyond typical considerations of the employment landscape or shifting workplace trends. The implications run much deeper. As the #1 Black digital media brand, Black Enterprise has continuously documented the economic and professional elevation of African Americans. Where we could, we have helped bring about those advances by serving as an information resource and vehicle for wealth building and smart money management. Black Enterprise also prides itself on having played a vital role in crashing barriers and opening doors for Black talent to enter professional and corporate spaces in which we have historically been excluded. Standing here upon that history and looking ahead to the future of work from a Black perspective, we are confronted with a challenging reality. Much of what we have gained collectively is at risk. An unprecedented convergence of economic, social, and political factors has upended work and industry norms that impact everyone. The pandemic, to start with the most obvious factor, created unprecedented economic disruption. Extended shutdowns wiped out whole categories of jobs, accelerated the adoption of technologies that facilitate remote and hybrid work, and forced every industry to adapt. Its ultimate impact on American workplace culture and economics remains uncertain. The common thread that connects all these trends is that Black professionals stand to be hit hardest in their wake. The global management consulting firm McKinsey & Company, whom you'll be hearing from this evening, reported in 2019 that 4.5 million African Americans could lose their jobs to automation. The firm noted that Black males are overrepresented in industries most likely impacted by displacement, including retail, manufacturing, and service industries. Just 3 years ago, in 2020, George Floyd's murder and the ensuing widespread protests seemed to bring about a larger reckoning. Corporate America responded, reaffirming its commitment to socially responsible practices and pledging to step up their investment in diversity, equity, and inclusion programs specifically focused on Black Americans. Today, the aforementioned passionate DE&I agenda has gone quiet, while a growing political backlash has targeted diversity programs and other socially conscious corporate efforts for elimination. How big of a threat is this apparent retrenchment of initiatives to promote Black talent recruitment and development in corporate America? Are these attacks on so-called woke corporate culture, in fact, changing the focus? We have assembled an esteemed panel who are corporate leaders best suited to dissect and discuss how such forces are dramatically transforming work and the workplace, as well as what these trends mean for Black Americans at all levels. They are Debbie Dyson, CEO of 110, Shelley Stewart III, a senior partner with McKinsey & Company, and Quita Highsmith, Vice President and Chief Diversity Officer at Genentech. Leading the conversation is our dynamic moderator, Emmy Award-winning journalist, entrepreneur, and a great friend of Black Enterprise, Mr. Ed Gordon. Before we get started, I would also like to share our appreciation to tonight's sponsor, Nationwide, for its partnership in ensuring that all communities have a platform for economic advancement, as well as bringing this event to you this evening. Now, a few words from our sponsor. Please welcome Nationwide's Executive Vice President and Chief Human Resource Officer, Ms. Vanita Clemens. Vanita?
Good evening, and thank you, Butch. And thank you to everyone for joining us. Welcome to tonight's Town Hall, The Future of Work. I'm Vanita Clemens, Chief Human Resource Officer at Nationwide, and on behalf of Nationwide, we are so excited to co-sponsor this session with Black Enterprise. Black Enterprise has been the premier source of inspiration, knowledge, and empowerment for Black Americans in the business world since 1970. They have consistently demonstrated their dedication to the economic success and financial independence of this community. Today, we are proud to join forces with them to continue driving engagement and growth for Black professionals across all sectors. At Nationwide, we share the same vision and commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion, and understand that the development of a strong network of Black professionals is not just about empowering individuals, but also about creating a thriving community that contributes to our collective success. In just a moment, our panel of esteemed speakers will explore our current state of racial equity in workforce development and delve into the reasons why it is so important for companies to retain Black talent to stay competitive in an increasingly globalized economy. They will also discuss the latest employee trends transforming today's workplace and what these changes mean for Black associates in the labor force. As we engage in this crucial conversation, we aim to inspire action, drive change, and propel the careers of Black Americans forward. This event is not just about discussing the future of work, it's about bringing it together to create opportunities for our community and ensure a brighter, more inclusive tomorrow. So again, thank you for joining us in this important and timely conversation tonight. We look forward to an insightful and productive discussion that will undoubtedly inspire and inform us all. Together, we can make a lasting impact on the lives and careers of Black Americans and continue to build a legacy of success, growth, and development.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ed Gordon, and welcome to the Black Enterprise Economic Equity and Racial Justice Town Hall on the Future of Work. As Butch and Vanita laid out for us, we are experiencing an unprecedented period of transformation in how America works and will work in the years ahead. And the implications for African Americans are indeed extraordinary. We'll address many of the facets of this transformation and how they impact African Americans' employment opportunities and career choices. We will also look at the changing workplace and how we work, and the skills workers will need to adapt and thrive. We have a great panel. First, Debbie Dyson. She is the CEO of 110. 110 is a job placement and talent development initiative with the mission of hiring, promoting, and advancing 1 million Black workers who do not have four-year college degrees into family-sustaining careers over the next decade. Next, Shelley Stewart, senior partner at global management consulting firm McKinsey & Company. He leads the company's Institute for Black Economic Mobility, responsible for groundbreaking research on the future of work. Stewart is also on the board of directors of the National Black MBA Association. Finally, Quita Highsmith. She is vice president and chief diversity officer of Genentech. Known as a leader in the corporate DE&I landscape, Highsmith also pioneered the company's Advancing Inclusive Research, the initiative looking to reduce disparities in clinical research participation for underrepresented groups. So, Shelley, let me ask you to start us off the idea of what you see as a thumbnail of the future of the workforce.
Yeah. And there's no doubt that right now we are going through a generational shift in work. I mean, there are a couple of things that got accelerated during the course of the pandemic, and then there are some new things that emerged. Let me hit on a few things. The first one I'm going to hit on is this idea of purpose. We've seen consistently in our surveys, not just at McKinsey, but in general, of the younger workers coming in and being much more mission aligned and purpose oriented in their work. And that has lots of implications that employers are still grappling with today. That's one thing. And I think that's only accelerated over the course of the pandemic, both because of what happened there, but also with the murder of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others. I think the second thing is there's this accelerating trend around automation. We've been talking about this for quite some time now. I think the pandemic accelerated aspects of it because it had to, because we couldn't get to certain places and do certain types of work. And then you've got these recent breakthroughs in generative AI, which have really kind of flipped the whole thing on its other side. And now you're thinking about the implications for white collar workers across a range of different fields. And so that's really creating a lot of energy, but also a lot of concern. And then the last thing is hybrid emerging in the context of the pandemic, but then clearly it has a place going forward. And again, a lot of employers are trying to grapple with what that means. And so if I just take a step back and think about those three things and what I'm seeing impacted from a workforce and an employer perspective, one, a big emphasis now, even increasingly, on the culture that you're building and how does that tie to mission and purpose of younger workers. On the automation front, what are the skills that are being replaced, but also in the spirit of productivity, but also the skills we're going to need in the workforce of the future, and how are we thinking about insulating us as a society from, not having work to do because we don't have the right skills in the new world, leveraging technology and the like. And so a different focus on skills and what those skills need to be. And then lastly, with hybrid operating model, how do we build operating models that can succeed in a world where your employees are much more distributed and you still need to drive outcomes for your customers across industries? And so, again, a generational shift in work, and we're all in our respective industries just trying to deal with what that means for us.
Quita, I want to ask you, if I might, you and I have done a couple of these panels down the line, and we talk about your expertise of DE&I, and we'll get into that specifically. But I'm curious, just on a general platform, if you will, what do you see as the future of the workforce? We've seen so many changes since COVID and the like, and obviously technology is changing the workforce at warp speed. What do you see down the line?
And I think the future of work is one that embraces the increasingly diverse world around us. And if we think about the census, the United States is quickly becoming a majority minority population. By 2045, the majority of the people in the country will consider themselves people of color. And I know for us at Genentech, we're always asking ourselves, what do we need to do in our own house? Because real change starts at home, right? Mm-hmm. And so are we building an organization that is fostering belonging of the people that are our current employee population, but our future? employee population. And I think COVID really showed us that we have a real opportunity to build on inclusion. There was a study that said many Black workers didn't even want to go back to the office because of the microaggressions in the office. And so now, as we're coming out of COVID, going back into the office, we really have to ask ourselves, are we doing the work that needs to be done to ensure that our current employee population feels safe, feels respected, feels included at the office?
Debbie, let me ask you, Quita talked about the idea of what's to come with diversity. That's certainly something that'll be interesting to see, because there is already pushback, as we've seen over the last year or so, in terms of, quite frankly, white workers feeling like, okay, enough. We've given you guys enough shine. But with what you guys are trying to do at 110, I'm curious how the changing face of the workforce, in terms of the old adage that, you need a college degree, particularly in corporate America, to make it through. I know that's been front and center for 110 and what you're doing. Give us a sense of how you see that and how you want that to change.
Yeah, I mean, if I think about what Shelley has shared, as well as Quita, this is a very dynamic time that we're in right now. I mean, the future of work really is all about not only where we work, why we work, what the work is all about. And 110 is really trying to be incredibly disruptive from the traditional way that hiring has been done. I mean, we've gone decades and decades, and I think we've all probably believed that the golden ticket to sort of land an opportunity or a job was to get a college education. And not that that's not important, but when you have 76% of African Americans in our nation today without a four-year degree, the odds in terms of trying to land a real sort of sustainable job are difficult. And so, again, 110 is about really trying to identify opportunities where focusing perhaps on skills as an alternative path may be just a different place to go. I think we would all agree, sort of post-pandemic, and maybe even before the pandemic, the journey in which everybody is on is very, very different. Not everybody has the means or the ability to actually, again, obtain a college education. And so we're trying to get employers to really sort of shift their mindset to say, if you look at your jobs today and you focused on skills, is skills more of a better determination of success than possibly a degree? And we will hopefully meet people where they're at. And this is a door of many other opportunities that we think is the right path for us to take.
Let me throw this out to everyone. What do you see as the biggest hurdle for change in terms of movement for the African-American worker? Because you're really working against, two ends, if you will. There's the end of the changing workforce by means of technology, and outdated nature of any given thing that really touches on all workers. And then there is the course of still last hired, first fired, the inability to climb up to levels, particularly within corporate America, at the same speed. What do you guys see as the biggest hurdle that you face as we move into this new dynamic?
Well, I'll go ahead and jump in here. I think one of the biggest things that we have to do is we have to stop tiptoeing around race in the workplace, right? We need to address it. The only way that we're going to make some real progress is we've got to be transparent. We've got to be intentional. And I think before COVID, we would have never had conversations around race in the workplace. But I do think that George Floyd murder spurred people to see what was happening. We were all sitting in the house. We weren't traveling. We could not go anywhere. At that very moment in time when we were sitting still, it allowed us to see what was happening. And I know for us at Genentech, that was the first time we ever had real conversations about race in the workplace. But we now have to be intentional. We have to be focused. We have to double down. We have made some progress, but it is going to be very easy to slip back to the status quo unless we are very intentional in moving the needle forward, which is why conversations like this are so important to keep the conversation going.
Shelley, I'm curious.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Debbie.
Let me just add on to that because I love the passion that's coming out here. What I would also add to that, though, it's not beyond just that. It's about being transparent. Like, this is about having honest, authentic conversations about the real issues. This cannot be something that we saw on the heels of the murder of George Floyd as just sort of an initiative, something that we just sort of check the box, like it's the thing for us to do. Like, this is a movement. This needs to be sustainable. This has to be long-term. This has to be action-oriented. We can't, again, tiptoe around the topic, but having those sort of honest, truthful conversations in the room and transparency, I think, is another key to really sort of making, again, these barriers that are in play that we all see there. It's like the elephant in the room. It's sitting right in the room. Let's talk about the elephant.
Shelley, how do we deal with some of this? I'm curious what data you all have found. As I said, McKinsey and Company has done a lot around the future of work and how we see it, and how race does and does not play a role in what we're looking at. I think what Quita suggested is it's very hard to get around the question of race in the workplace, just period. It's almost naive to assume that it doesn't. When you look at AI and it's coming, that's going to disproportionately affect the Black worker. When you look at the idea of working from home, remote working, the environmental aspect of work that questions whether or not African Americans are going to be able to do the same kind of road work they've been working so hard at doing, kind of finding their place in the workplace. Whether it's better remotely, some African Americans believe the politics is less. If that's the case, what has the data found that you've put forth?
Yeah, and I think it's a really interesting and nuanced topic. I think you are exactly right that at least the data that we have suggests that Black employees have a stronger preference for hybrid work relative to other employees. In fact, we found that they were 14% more likely than their white peers to leave a job if hybrid was not an option. And I think we can all kind of, speculate as to what various reasons are. I think it presents both an opportunity and a challenge. Let me give the opportunity side first. Traditionally, in a non-hybrid world, geography was a major constraint for flows of talent. And we know that the Black population disproportionately actually lives in the southeast part of the United States. And we also know that in some of those places, jobs may not be as abundant as in some other parts of the country. And so this creates an opportunity for you to not be bound by that kind of physical proximity and really look in a bigger pool. So I think that is a good thing. That being said, we know one of the historic challenges in the workplace for Black Americans is around sponsorship and having individuals who are in the organization, for lack of a better term, who can actually change the odds for you. And one of the things that we know is that, again, we have lower sponsorship today. I don't know that a hybrid world makes that better. In fact, it probably exacerbates. I think there is some risk of out of sight, out of mind. Mm-hmm. And so I do worry that some of the issues that we already face from a sponsorship perspective get exacerbated in this world where you're not proximate to these people who could be the ones that change the odds for you. And so I don't have an elegant or simple solution to that, but I do think we have to be mindful that there are real opportunities that are being created, but there is some potential to exacerbate some of the historical challenges that we have faced in the workplace.
Quita, could you give us just very quickly, a Cliff Notes version of the difference? Because I think a lot of people don't know the difference between a mentor and a sponsor.
Yeah. I think a mentor is someone that you go to for advice counsel, but a sponsor is someone that has a seat at the table in the C-suite. They're going to be talking about you when you are not there. But I want to caution the audience. You can't go up to somebody and say, hey, will you be my sponsor? Right? It is a relationship built on trust. They have to know that you are going to deliver on what you've said. And I will tell you, I've had sponsors throughout my career, and I'm give you an example of what a sponsor can do for you. I was interviewing for a role, and I knew I wasn't doing well in the interview. So my sponsor said, ask for a do-over. And I was like, what? He said, ask to do the interview again. I'm gonna call the guy up and I want you to interview again. I asked for the do-over and got the job. But that privilege of knowing that you can ask for a second chance was told to me by the sponsor. Without that, I wouldn't have been able to take that next step in my career.
Mm-hmm. Debbie, give me a sense of, what you're hearing here and juxtapose that to what you're trying to do. The workforce is ever increasingly becoming technical. STEM is more and more important. The idea of the medical field is growing. Quita deals with that every day. I'm curious how we juxtapose that with the idea of bringing people in, at least at first blush, who may not seem to be as ready as others who have gone to college to tackle these fields. And the truth is, and I'm sure you'll suggest this, is oftentimes you learn more on the job than you do with that degree. But give me a sense of how you're balancing that.
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would tell you at 110, what we've seen from the employers that are part of, our ecosystem is, beyond IT, beyond medical, there's retail, there's manufacturing, there's sort of hospitality. Those are the 5 fields that we're seeing are really having the biggest traction thus far. And the way that we're trying to sort of evolve and really sort of, address this sort of competitive nature is we find talent partners and talent developers that are really leaning into this effort where they recognize that there is good talent that has not been seen, understood, or represented well without a degree. And we're creating programs that are really designed very, very specifically that are, to your point, sort of on-the-job training. You are only going to be trained in this field. And depending on how work ready you are, because perhaps you've been working for a while, you're unaware that you have the potential to actually gain better employment. We're creating these programs that could be 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months, however long it takes. And upon completion, you're able to take a certification to an employer that says, I am part of this coalition, I am part of this mission and this belief in terms of gaining, employment, and you're presenting that to the employer and you're making a match. And we've seen thus far, like 87,000 African-American Black talent has actually been hired through our coalition. So we know it can work, but it's going to take real meaningful effort. And again, this on-the-job training designed specifically for the skill that you're able to bring has made a difference. And we think that we can continue to obviously make a significant impact if we keep our focus going in this direction.
Let me follow up on that with you, Debbie, and then I'll ask our other 2 panelists to jump in and give us their thoughts. I think about the idea of a college degree needed. That was almost a prerequisite for anyone who wanted an executive job in corporate America. Yet I believe for many years, it wasn't so much the need for that in terms of you being able to do the job. It was a good filter to keep certain people out, quite frankly. How do we get past some of those kind of log jams that we've seen over the years?
Yeah, I mean, we have, I don't know if I'm going to have the most eloquent answer here, but here's what I would tell you that we've seen. I can even use myself as an example. I mean, I have my degree. It's in finance. You could arguably say what I'm doing today has nothing to do with finance whatsoever. But what I would tell you is that when we've done case studies and we've talked to talent that actually has been placed or talent that we see potential, it's this resiliency. There is a grit, there is a desire, there is a hunger that you can't necessarily teach. The atmosphere, the culture in which you were raised, the environment in which you were sort of taught, I think really brings out those characteristics and skills. And so when we've been able to sort of connect large enterprise Fortune 500 companies and having discussions in a real open forum and having, again, that authentic and honest conversation in the room, I think there's almost an awareness. And again, these are voices that have been silenced deliberately or not so deliberately around being seen, understood, and recognized and valued. And when we've been able to, again, show the success, I think, again, real meaningful progress has happened.
Mhm.
You know,
Shall we follow up on that if you would?
And if I, sure, I'm happy to jump in and share a reaction there. Look, I think maybe a few thoughts. One, I love what the 110 Coalition is doing, and I love the general push around, let's get very specific about the skills we want to build in the labor force and help address actual jobs that are available today, because there are jobs that are going unfilled today. I mean, one of the big trends we talked about is automation. Well, one of the big jobs that comes in the context of automation is you still need people that understand the machines. You still need people that know how to operate the machines that are doing a lot of the work to automate things like manufacturing and warehousing and distribution. And we have a shortage in the US of those jobs. I have clients who say to me, I'd love to automate my factory. I'm just worried that I won't have service techs to service the equipment once I actually go do that. And so I think that's a real thing. And so this notion of credentials and specific skills into jobs, I think, is incredibly powerful and important. And we need to stay very focused on that. Let me make two other points, though. One is I sometimes get a little bit nervous in the discussion around when we talk about Black Americans and we talk about colleges. I totally understand and appreciate the notion that not everyone needs a college degree. But I want to just be clear, the data is unequivocal that whether you are Black or you are white or you are Asian or you're Hispanic, the ROI on average is pretty high for a bachelor's degree relative to a high school diploma. And then you even get distance when you start to talk about advanced degrees. So I want to make sure we don't fall into this potential trap of saying, well, other folks are going to go get degrees. We're going to focus on this other thing, because I think the data says that the ROI is still there. The caveat being, we need to be thoughtful about the majors, the skills we're building in the context of getting these degrees, because you also, if you parse the data, different degrees have different returns on investment. And so I really, really do believe we should be expanding access to college opportunities, steering kids towards fields that have disproportionate returns on investment, and also finding pools of the population that are better suited for more targeted skills and credentialing to get into the workforce. I think it's an and, not an or.
Quita, I'd like you to pick up on that with the idea that for too long, African Americans, by virtue of being quite frankly stonewalled or kept out of particular jobs and areas, we became the people who came up on the tail end of them when they were becoming obsolete. You know, it wouldn't do us well to become a VCR repair person right now. And so, when you think about that, what do we need to do?
Well, one, I completely agree that we do have to, it's not a either or, it's an and, because the data shows us that the male Black physician percent has not changed in 100 years, right? And we need to have Black physicians because we know our outcomes will be better. And so we have got to do some interventions really early in secondary education, through academia. And one of the things that we're doing is we're targeting students from the general population, because so many times companies will target the elite institutions, but we're targeting not for the enriched population, the ones that are in the science programs already, but how do we target people who are great students, but they might be the first person in their family to go to school. They may have to be working 2 or 3 jobs. How do we surround that student and get a bigger pool of students into STEM? Because we have got to grow the pool of Black students that are going into these STEM fields, because STEM is, and that's for the audience, science, technology, engineering, math, those roles are growing at 9%, much more rapidly than some other fields. And those STEM fields also pay more. So we have got to surround sound our people into going into these fields, but we also have to be thinking of the interventions, the plum assignments, the internships, the rotations, the postdocs. How do we ensure that they get that same opportunity that other students are getting?
So let me raise this question to each of you, and Quita, since you brought it up, I'll put it to you first. How do we do that? I'm doing a story on mental health, and when you look at clinicians, Black clinicians, they're only 4%. They only make up 4% in that field. It's extraordinarily low. We've been talking about growing in certain fields, quite frankly, for some years now. How do we assure ourselves as a community that we are channeling these folks into these fields that not only are needed, but by virtue of, as Shelley suggested, the idea of the good living you can make out of many of these fields if you just want to be individually selfish? How do we make sure that we're putting these young people on the right track?
I think the first thing we have to do is focus on retention, right? Because people will raise their hand and say, I'm interested in that, but they will get shot down. And so one of the things that we have to do is we have to be thinking long term. It takes 15 years, right, to become a physician or a scientist. So we have got to be working to retain that student throughout the course of their undergraduate, their graduate, their post graduate time. And that is where we lose people in the pipeline. And so we've got to be thinking of what are the opportunities that we can surround our students so that make it to the finish line. And it doesn't matter how long it takes, right? It's not just about getting the degree. It is about getting to the end, getting to the finish line. Even if it takes them a little bit longer, we've got to get them to the end.
Debbie?
Yeah, maybe just to add to that, one area that I think we've seen tremendous success has actually been in apprenticeships. So if you think about, again, opportunities that exist within organizations, there is good talent that is looking for promotional opportunities. And I think we've already said, we've talked about retention. So what do you do with a population that's already in the workforce today and try to elevate their career path to something a little bit further down the road? The other point that I wanted to raise just in relation to 110, when we're talking about these opportunities as a way to get your foot in the door, again, we went after Fortune 500 because the hope is once you get in, there's educational reimbursement that actually can hopefully help you sort of finish a degree if you've already started. But the jobs that we're talking about are family sustaining. This is not minimum wage. We're trying to get you into really meaningful jobs that, again, get you in the seat, possibly internships, apprenticeships, what have you, and promotional opportunities for the long term as well.
Shelley, any thoughts on that? If not, I've got a question I'd like you to address first, though.
Well, I think it was well. I think it's well said. And maybe I just lift up 2 points. I love what Quita said. We've got this notion that we've been thinking about at McKinsey, which is how do we move from elite hiring, so focusing on a subset of institutions as a shortcut, to hiring distinctive talent wherever it may be. And so, and by the way, that's a competitive differentiator because everyone is going to a set of schools that have, in theory, already done the screening for distinctive talent. And so we really try to open the aperture there, and really try to kind of go and come up with new and creative models to get talent in. So I think that is, that is a really good point I wanted to just pick up.
How do we deal with the idea? Just this week, one of the men who are on the forefront of the development of AI has stressed the idea that we have to be careful what AI is becoming. We are already hearing about AI, shrinking the job market for humans. Forget that it's, black, white, or otherwise, just fewer people because AI will take over some of those jobs. Many of those jobs, though, disproportionately are currently held by Black workers. If we look across the landscape of corporate America, we've continued to see that landscape shrink and shrink and shrink over the last couple of decades. how do we make sure that the workforce in and of itself does not become too small before African Americans and people of color, and to a lesser degree, but still a degree, women, are able to play catch up? How do we make sure that that's a possibility?
Yeah. Look, I think that is the $1 million question. Look, we've been grappling with this question around the implications of automation on the workforce for a long time. And I think the discussion has been accelerated recently with recent breakthroughs in generative AI. And the reality of it is that we don't yet know what the jobs of the future will look like as we start to think about the different use cases. I got clients coming to me every day across sectors saying, whoa, how do I think about generative AI and overlaying that into my business? And it's coming from across a range. I think one thing is it will take time for that technology to actually become productive and useful. And you're seeing it in some places. We're only scratching the surface. So I think in that context, we need to be thinking about, from a Black community perspective, how are we familiarizing ourselves in our community with the latest breakthroughs in this technology? And I think in the end, new jobs will be created. When we find this time and time again, I want to we often in spare the history lesson, but every time there's a breakthrough in something that's going to drive dramatic economic productivity, we have a crisis as a country or as a world around what does it mean for farmers now that we've got kind of steam driven equipment on the farm or whatever it may be. New jobs will be created. And so I think the best thing that we can do as a society, and then specifically as Black Americans, is exactly what we've been saying. Build the foundational understanding of the things that go into and drive technology, math, science, engineering skills, because that will position us to create and reimagine and think about new jobs so that we can get even more out of the technology. And so that is to say, we are limited in our thinking if we just say, based on the work we do today, how can we use generative AI to be more productive and get rid of jobs? That's maybe step one. But I think the way we should be thinking about it is, how can we take this massive leap in technology and use it to reimagine and recreate professions and recreate work? And so I think we need to commit just as much time to that as we are to how do we get more productive with the stuff we're already doing today.
Hey, Ed, I was gonna just offer something, maybe a little bit of a provocative comment. And Shelley, I don't know if you would agree with this, but some of the research that I've been doing of late around AI is, should we be thinking about AI instead of possibly as a threat, but almost like a complement to our work? Should we be thinking about AI as almost a coworker? So instead of seeing it as somebody that's going to take my job, how about it's somebody that works within my team dynamics? And I think you sort of touched on this a little bit, Shelley, around if we're able to educate and understand how technology works, as you think about artificial intelligence, machine learning, et cetera, are there areas where you can embed yourself from a talent perspective, African-American talent, to learn more about how it works and where machine learning and where AI sort of work in the stream, the process flow, and again, complement our work instead of necessarily being a threat? It might just be a different way, provocatively, to think about it, opposed to replacing me. How does it complement me instead? So just a different way of thinking that I've seen of late.
I would agree that I think artificial intelligence for the Black community is urgent. We need to be getting trained up on it, because here's the reality. The people who are doing the chat GPTs, the people who are working on this, they don't look like us. And so I know for medicine, health equity could potentially, it could worsen disparities, right? Because when we look at the data, millions of Black people are going to be impacted by racial bias in algorithms unless we get in the room, right? And when we look at the diversity of data sets that are available to scientists, They're not very diverse. If Africa is supposed to be the oldest genome in the world, less than 1% of all genetic data comes from Africa. It's 2% from African Americans. This is an urgent issue that we need to ensure that we have a Black workforce that is getting involved in.
I want to see if I can raise this, though. And at the end of the day, it becomes a mathematical equation of profit, right, for corporate America. And when we talk about the lessening of, a profit margin because I've got to hire 3 people versus letting AI take it over, it may not be the worker itself seeing the idea of this being not a hindrance, but a help to my workload. It's whether the people in the C-suites and the corner offices see it as a math equation that says, yeah, that may help you out and assist you, but at the end of the day, I'm going to make a larger profit by means of eliminating this division, this workplace. I see it in my own industry. You used to walk into a studio and you'd see 5 or 6 people manning cameras. Now, literally in Los Angeles the other day, I went into a studio where I was the only person in that studio. And so, how do we get to the idea that profit continues to be king? And is that a concern we have to look at?
Yeah, I'm happy to start on this one. Oh, go ahead, Debbie, please.
No, please, Shelley, go ahead.
So what I would say is, I think Ed, you are right, and I think we have to overlay a component of time on this. The reality is, yes, in the near term, people are looking for ways to become more productive, but long-term value for shareholders, for companies, for investors does not come from getting more productive and taking cost out. And so I think what we have to be thinking about is the growth side of the equation, right? I'm a growth marketing and sales practitioner at McKinsey. You will get some folks who increment around the edges to take cost out, but the people who really create value are going to also be creating jobs from generative AI and automation, because they are going to be using it to grow, to create top line opportunities that will still require talent. And so, we don't yet know the final answer, but the way that I think about this with my clients who are really talking about taking advantage of this, it's not the marginal productivity they're thinking about. They're thinking about, how do I use this as a vector to triple, quadruple, quintuple the size of my enterprise, which is the true value creator for shareholders. And so I think if we take that growth angle to it, you will see a lot of upside, and not just focusing on the kind of smaller kind of iterating around the edges to get more productive.
Let me try a real life example before the ladies chime in here, and that would be the bank teller. I recall a few years ago when the bank tellers, when you go into the bank, would say to you, oh, you can do that at the ATM. And I used to think to myself, man, I know, Bank X is telling you to tell the customers that. But ultimately, what they're going to do is replace you with the ATM. And sure enough, in many banks now where you had 4 and 5 and 6 tellers, now you have 1, and they push you toward the ATM. Is that too naive of an example, Debbie, to kind of put forth?
I don't want to say it's naive. It's interesting. Look, I have a background in human capital management for over 34 years. So you can probably imagine the way that we service and support sort of the consumers today is very, very different. Mm-hmm. And we use a lot of language like omni-channel, which is like there are different ways that customers want to receive their service. So when this whole self-service initiative came, it was sort of a little bit of a response to, we've got 6 different generations that are working in the workforce today, 6 different generations. And you could argue all 6 want to be serviced differently. So when I think about the teller scenario, like when you go into a bank, I can't even remember how to deposit a check any longer. But I just don't. I don't even remember how to do it. But there is a little bit. I might slightly disagree with Shelley politely around productivity, because there is a productivity play. How fast can you actually get through transactions? There's a speed. There's a quality. There's the consumer. there's the consumer aspect, there's the cost to serve, there's a cost to support. So I think all of those to me sort of go right to this return on investment or to the bottom line. And I don't think there's a one size fits all. I mean, you see this in the grocery stores now. You see people actually now arguing around, if I have to actually sort of do my own, do my own transactions, why am I paying you in the first place and why are your prices so high? So there is a little bit of a, call it this correlation that's happening right now in terms of how customers are receiving it and what customers want to receive. I mean, it's an interesting dynamic, and I think it's going to continue to evolve, obviously, as our generations continue to sort of evolve as well.
Peter, let me ask you this, and then you can pick up on that. But let me take what Debbie so politely did and say, well, dude, you got gray hair and you're, still worried about a teller in a bank. And just to let you know, I do take the picture with this thing and deposit it that way. But the point is, you're right. Generationally, we're going to see a difference as we move forward. I also remind young people that not everything new is better. And so we have to ask ourselves, who starts to define, better and worse, more productive and less productive, and how do we kind of balance the idea that something may be better technologically but not be better for the people in the workforce?
The thing that I'm going to say is, I do think technology in certain aspects offers convenience. And let's think about mental health, right? I think our people in the Black community oftentimes don't want to talk about mental health. But now, because of technology, because there are apps that people can use to seek a therapist, that the younger generation is more open to being able to talk about their mental health needs, and the convenience of the app. You don't have to go somewhere, park, and go to a brick and mortar facility. The artificial intelligence can match you with the perfect fit for you. So I do think that technology can be useful. I worry, however, that you've now got all your information stored somewhere on a server. And at some point, we've seen all these data breaches. Does your information become public somehow? So I do think technology offers us access to greater services, but it also offers us risk to our security and safety.
Let me bring in one other thing that we have to talk about on the front end of the future. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry. I just want to say, I want to just push on this. I think it's a really important discussion. I want to just hit two threads. The first is, I just want to clarify. I'm not saying that automation and Gen AI will not drive productivity. What I'm saying is the value creation will not come from the companies who are focused on it from a productivity perspective solely. The value creation will come from building new businesses and scaling top line growth. And I think that will also create new jobs that we have not yet imagined today. And I think the case in the point on this is, you use the bank teller example. My push would be, I'm not sure that is the right unit of analysis, in the sense that there are other jobs that have been created in the banking ecosystem as a result of technology. More people work in commercial banking today than they did 22 years ago. I think, I don't know the exact number. I want to say it's at least a few 100,000. We have record, maybe we don't love the measure of unemployment. I have my own views the way.
Part of that, though, let's be fair with that number, though. Part of that is you just have more banks in general than you do.
But
proportionately, it's a smaller number.
Again, the unit of analysis is, to me, how many productive people are in the workforce.
Sure.
As a percentage of the total population. We have record low unemployment today. We can get back to the kind of the quality of the job. But my point is just, we have had technological disruption since the beginning of time. And time again, we reinvent our economy and reinvent the jobs. And so I think we have to just it is, I know it ends up being a little bit more of an abstract conversation, but in the end, the value that's going to get created is not going to be for, McKinsey taking, making this up, 10% less analysts because we have Gen AI. It will come because we're able to build new businesses and new capabilities that will actually create employment. And so I remain pretty optimistic about that. And that history also suggests that we have a great ability to reinvent our economy and create new jobs. We need to be focused on the quality of those jobs, but I don't think we're on the threshold of falling off a cliff.
And whatever those new jobs will be is what we touched on, that African Americans, people of color, need to be on the front end of that. That's as opposed to the back end of what we've seen. Let me throw an acronym out as we're running up against the clock here. One that is, being currently bantied about, and that's ESG, environment, social, and governmental. And that is, part and parcel of the conversation of, what we're starting to see from certain politicians, the attack on what, employment should be, what it should look like, who in fact should be employed. How concerned, if at all, are any of you with, what we have seen politically? Many would say the regression in discussion about diversity. Quita, let me start with you, as that's, your bailiwick. Give me a sense of, your concern there. We certainly are seeing some pushback.
I'm proud to say that at Genentech, we are the founder of the biotech industry, and we see this as a leadership opportunity. We have the highest number of Blacks and African Americans in the history, and Latinx and Hispanic people in Genentech history. We just published our data on our website. We have a diversity inclusion annual report. We've made 8 diversity and inclusion commitments that we started in 2020 that we wanted to have achieved by 2025. And this is not a check the box type of exercises. This is us being intentional, having clarity, and understanding that by embracing the increasingly diverse world around us, we're going to expand our business because we're going to be studying patients of color. We're going to be coming up with innovations driven by our workforce. And so there's no slowing down for us. And so this notion that ESG is somehow causing companies not to be successful is absolutely not true. And we can look at our first quarter results to show that we're making progress.
Mm-hmm. Debbie, what's your thought there?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, the threat is real. While obviously I hear that the passion from a Genentech, and not to say that that's a unicorn or an exception, when we're looking at on a broader perspective, from my past role to the one that I'm leading right now, the threat around DE&I is incredibly real. We're arguably in the middle of a recession as people are making sort of tough decisions, if you want to call it that. This is the first area that they go. They don't see it as a priority. It's not maybe coming from the top. It's the area that's the quickest one to eliminate. Call that an excuse, call it whatever. It's absolutely what we're seeing. You layer in then sort of this sort of political environment or message that is sort of, making the airwaves also the combination of two. Many of our employers within the coalition or outside of the coalition are seeing it as a threat. So it does impact our ability, again, for everything that we've talked about thus far today around trying to place and get good, meaningful jobs for Black talent. These are real threats that we're seeing, and it's not something that we can ignore. I think, again, coming from the top, having that ecosystem, having that belief and continuing to pound the pavement obviously will make a significant difference, but it's a real threat and something that I think we're experiencing more often than not.
Shelley, I'm curious what the data, and as I said, you all have been very intentional and extensive in looking at the future workplace for people of color. Give me a sense of how you see, the political underpinnings of all of this.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt. I agree with Debbie that there are significant headwinds being created by the political context. Right, most of the firms that we all work for are nonpartisan for very good reason, and they have to kind of be mindful of what folks on both sides are saying as they craft their own messaging and their own approach. That being said, if I think about the flow of discussions that I'm in on this topic across North America, across industries, what I'm finding is that the people who have made the commitments to do the work are still doing the work. They may be changing the frame of how they talk about it and the nomenclature and the language, but I am finding time and time again, a bit to my surprise, that people are actually very, very committed because they see not only the moral imperative, right, to build a more equitable society, but I also think one thing happened in the context of George Floyd that I think we've been trying to kind of land for quite some time as a society, and this notion of the Black, the brown consumers matter. They matter to your bottom line. And I think if we can keep the drumbeat up, right? Today, Black consumers are spending $1 trillion in the economy. We expect them to be spending $1.7 trillion annually by 2030. That's a massive contribution to GDP in an economy that is driven largely by consumption. If we can continue to center the diverse and inclusive consumer in conversations with companies who intend to service them, well, they'll have no choice but to continue to be focused on creating opportunities. And I think that is the real imperative, is to keep the business opportunities centered in addition to the moral imperative, which I think many folks felt in the context of George Floyd. But we can't let up. We got to keep doing the work.
Let me ask, as we wrap here, for each one of you to be a prognosticator, as we have asked throughout this hour. What advice would you give for those who are seeking, a firmer terra firma to stand on, in terms of their future in the workplace? Shelley, I'll start with you. What would you give as a bit of advice?
So you got to commit to being a lifetime learner. The interesting thing, again, I am not a doomsdayer on this automation or AI thing. I think new opportunities and new jobs will absolutely be created. We will be freed up from mundane tasks to do more interesting and more important work. But what it means practically is the skills that you have today, whereas they might have lasted you 10, 20, 15, 30 years in the past, the rate of change today means they might last you a year or 2 years. And so committing to being a lifelong learner, committing to that curiosity that encourages you to continue to build skills, will allow you to keep reinventing yourself in the new paradigm that is coming as a result of what technology is doing.
All right. Ms. Highsmith?
I think the thing that I would say to companies is praising the power of diversity while underrepresented voices are absent really lacks credibility. And it is time for organizations to take this moment, make it an inclusion moment, and be proactive. Because at the end of the day, we all want our work at any company. We want our work to be successful. Many of us are shareholders in these companies. And it is going to take long-term investment and thinking for us to really embrace the increasingly diverse world around us.
And Debbie, I'll ask you to wrap yours around what you all are looking to do over the course of the next decade, because I think that's important as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, look, the work that 110 is trying to accomplish is very much purpose-driven. This is something that is life-changing. Our ability and need to try to identify 1 million jobs in 10 years for Black talent without a degree into family-sustaining roles with this skills-first approach is meaningful. This was 2.5 years ago, and the energy and the momentum that we had upon the death and murder of George Floyd is something that is near and dear to us in terms of what we keep at the forefront of our thoughts. And so it requires, again, not an initiative, but a movement for those to lean in, to want to be helpful. And again, this is just part of a larger ecosystem and an opportunity or a slice of something that we think we can make an impact on, recognizing that not everybody is on this particular path, recognizing that this, again, is just one piece of a larger movement in which hopefully we can all lean in together. I think it's, like I said, it's very purposeful and hopefully will make the impact that I think we all want to see.
Yeah, it's hard to believe that we'll be coming up on the 3-year anniversary of that tragic incident. But as many in his camp have suggested, they didn't want his death to be in vain. And it has changed the landscape, at least of how things are looked at. And I think it is incumbent upon all of us to make sure that it's not just a blip on the radar screen. So Shelley Stewart, Debbie Dyson, and Quita Highsmith, we thank you so much for joining us for this discussion. And we thank you for joining us. We hope you'll join us as Black Enterprise brings you the next town hall.
Thank you for joining us for tonight's Economic Equity and Racial Justice Town Hall on the future of work. My name is Derek Dingle, Chief Content Officer for Black Enterprise. We hope you have gained valuable information and insight from this virtual experience and will apply them to ensure our professional elevation in today's evolving post-pandemic work environment. We would like to thank our dynamic moderator, Ed Gordon, and powerful speakers, Debbie Dyson, Shelley Stewart III, and Quita Highsmith for their impassioned and impactful conversation that will inspire us all to take immediate action. We would also like to extend our deep appreciation to our sponsor, Nationwide, for its role in producing tonight's program. Remember, you and others can engage in on-demand viewings of this session on blackenterprise.com, and we encourage you to share your thoughts and comments on our social media channels using the hashtag #BETownHall. Black Enterprise is the #1 digital media brand, and as such, we present content offerings to enhance your business and financial lives. However, to further our advancement on all fronts, we must act now. Be on the lookout for our upcoming live event, the all-new Black Enterprise Disruptor Summit in Atlanta from June 2nd to 4th. For more information on our future events and town hall sessions, go to blackenterprise.com/events. Thank you for joining us. Have a good night.